This is Raul Lopez, and you're listening to How Do You Say Success in Spanglish? The path to success isn't easy. For minorities and people of color, many attempt this journey with little to no guidance. Join me as I sit down with individuals who share their stories of perseverance so that together we can learn how to say success in Spanglish. What's good, mi gente? It's your boy Raul. Welcome back to How Do You Say Success in Spanglish. Today we have Carlene Fonseca. How's it going?
Hello.
Hey, welcome to the show. It's kind of interesting having you on the show. Just for everybody to find out about Carlene. Carlene has a long time ago. I went back to the program up and down, and I worked as a counselor. And she was actually one of my students. So we've gone a long way from where you were in high school to where you are now, and we've reunited recently, and it was great to catch up. And I'm definitely glad you reached out and asked me, jump on the show. And so I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so just to kind of give an intro on Carlene Fonseca, the CEO and chief consultant of the Greatest You Consulting, brings a diverse and rich background in leadership, community engagement, and education. Carlene holds several roles in long-term contracts, such as the statewide director for the Rhode Island After School Network, working with professionals in out-of-school time throughout the state of Rhode Island, a core faculty member with College Unbound, an educational program for non-traditional adult learners. Carlene also spent some time as a program director in Central Falls School District, where she manages significant budgets and led impactful educational programs. Carlene's educational journey includes a BA in government from Georgetown University, an MA in criminology from George Washington University, and an ongoing MBA from Providence College. She has also attained certification and skills in diverse areas like social emotional learning facilitations, yoga, mental health first aid, and racial equality facilitation. Carlene's motivation for the business stems from her commitment to fostering personal and professional growth, utilizing her strengths in strategic thinking, leadership, and community development. Carlene is a proud mother, a lifelong learner, loves listening to podcasts and hitting the gym. She enjoys a healthy lifestyle both physically and emotionally, in recovery as a survivor of childhood and adult traumatic experiences, and loves empowering others in the community to become their best self. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a very impressive. You do so much, and I follow you on Instagram, so I see all the stuff you post all the time, and the things you're making moves on. So I'm really excited to kind of get into it. So I guess to kind of start off, tell me, who is Carlene?
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And who is Carlene? That's a good question, right? Because growing up, I've been trained to, I think society, we're just trained to like define ourselves by our roles and the things that we do in our jobs. And that's why I started saying like my roles are, right? Because I am a person outside of any position I hold, any job, any career. I'm a mother, I'm a dog mom. I'm someone who loves movement and exercise and anything that gets my mind and my body moving. I love helping people. I'm a lifelong learner. So whether that's reading, that's learning more about myself. At 34 years old, I think every single day I'm learning something different. So I would say Carlene is a work in progress. I am settling into my own skin and learning who I am. And I'm very proud of that. Nice. So we'll get into it, but on surface level, that's who I am.
Nice. Yeah. I think that last sentence you said, settling into your own skin is kind of a lifetime progression. Every year you might get a little bit better and better with it, but it's never something you fully get used to, especially early on. Like you said, we're always defined sometimes by the roles we think we're supposed to be in, that we never really understand where we're supposed to go. And so I'm glad to hear that you're doing so well with that. So I get so obviously one of the things you said when in your pre-interview questionnaire is that you said you are from Central Falls by way of Cape Verde. For most people, those are two words that they've never heard, especially in one sentence. So can you tell me a little bit about being Cape Verdean and growing up in Central Falls?
Yes, absolutely. So I I joined the sorority in college, and we always used to say by way of if somebody was like not originally from the United States. And although I was born in America, born and raised in Central Falls, I identify very heavily with my Cape Verdean culture, especially as a first generation person here. So my parents came here from Cape Verde in the 80s, and they didn't have a college education. They barely had a middle school education. But they always pushed on to all of us, like, get a degree and, be a lawyer, be a doctor, those things that immigrant parents tell their kids to do. So I did well in school. And I love Central Falls. I got a tattoo of CF because it's my initials, but it's also where I'm from. And growing up here taught me a lot. It taught me a lot, and I did well. Like, academically, I graduated number 2 in my class. My brothers and sisters all graduated number 1. So I was the one that was like that. I was the oddball. I was the one that used to get in trouble. I experienced a lot of childhood traumatic experiences. So I think with that, I started acting out. I actually just got diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. Because of my daughter, and I wish like somebody had picked up on that a long time ago. But I always did well, and one thing that CF taught me was perseverance. So I tell people I may not have had the best education here. Upper Bound helped offset that, but I was taught to persevere. That no matter what I went through, that I would find a way. If one path didn't work out, I would go another route. So I'm very proud of that, being from Central Falls.
Yeah. I mean, even though I kind of finished up the tail end of my life growing up in Pawtucket, and my parents still live in Pawtucket now, I did spend a lot of my early ages growing up, I think from like first grade till about 6th, 7th grade in Central Falls. I think I started Central Falls Junior High School, and then left to Pawtucket. So I kind of lived all over. So yeah, so CF has a dear place in my heart. And for people, look up Central Falls, Rhode Island, learn about the tiniest little city in the tiniest little town, in the tiniest little state. There's a lot of amazing culture in that city of Central Falls. So it's great. I love being there. And then watching it develop from where it was years ago to where it is now has been pretty amazing. So, and I agree. I mean, Central Falls is not the smoothest place to grow up with. Is rough, and there is a lot of perseverance that occurs there, and people, a lot of strength in that town and for the people there. But obviously, you mentioned a little bit about having to deal with a variety of childhood trauma and stuff like that. But would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll talk a little bit more about like my Cape Verdean heritage. So, I had a huge family. My grandfather had 34 kids, different women. And I ended up meeting a lot of my uncles and aunts in adulthood. And my grandfather, he actually died by suicide in Cape Verde the year before I was born. And we never really grew up talking about feelings, mental health. I think like at first I thought it was like Cape Verdeans who just didn't do that, but it's every culture, right? Yeah. Like nobody just talked about mental health and those challenges and sweeping things under the rug. And it's like, as long as the garden looked clean, it didn't matter what happened like inside the house, right? Even till this day, it's like that. So growing up, I was like in an emotionally abusive household, neglectful. Like my parents did everything that they could. Like I was always, even growing up in Central Falls, it's like everyone was like poor, quote unquote, right? So it's like I didn't go without, but what I did go without was that emotional support and structure and checking in and validating my feelings. Like my emotions and my feelings were never validated growing up. So I always grew up like questioning myself and my worth. And then like late elementary, early middle school, I was like sexually abused by a great uncle. And that kind of like turned my whole life upside down. And I started like acting out in school. My grades started going down. And now that as I'm older and I'm getting into like psychology and health and wellness and learning about all this stuff, it's like I had all the signs that something was like wrong with me, something happened to me, and no adult in my life, whether it's like a mentor, teacher, parent, checked in to say like what is going on, right? And so I kept it silent until I was an adult. I just came out with that um a few years ago. And we'll get into like the effects of all of that. But growing up, I just felt like I needed to always validate myself and improve my worth. And especially in like a Cape Verdean culture, like you just keep it quiet and keep it moving, keep it pushing. So I mean, that's what I did, and I was able to excel in school, like I said. But inside, deep down, like things just weren't right. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I mean, not completely, and not to say anything about me, but the cultural aspect of our lives, where our emotional well-being, especially back in the day, back when we were growing up as kids, it wasn't as big as it is now. Now there's a big focus on it. Now there's a big thing where every time your kids something's going on, it's, oh, that's therapy and things like that. And in our culture, that wasn't the case. You know what I mean? You sucked it up and you kept moving. And if something bad happens, is don't say anything, because we don't want people to think bad about our family. And that a lot of kids dealt with the same type of lack of support emotionally on all aspects of anything that we had. So thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for being open, about it, because obviously, it's great to be able to share these situations to help other people, overcome, their obstacles and their ability to hold things in. And so obviously, you said you kind of did really good in school, kind of despite that. Were you kind of like pinpoint focusing in school because it was kind of keeping your mind off of other things that you were dealing with? Was that your outlet?
My outlet was probably sports. So
Sports.
I grew up playing sports at an early age. Basketball was like my number one thing. I joined our we had a girls team at the time for the city. I think I was 9 years old when I started to play.
Mhm.
So that was like my outlet. I played basketball throughout high school. I scored 1,000 points, but I also played soccer, volleyball, softball. I did track, and I also volunteered and I did community service. I think something inside of me, like growing up in a community like Central Falls, right? We're the third most populated city, I think, in the country. Right. We have over 25,000 residents in 1 square mile. Like that's a lot of people. Like a lot of resources are pressed. Our city budget's not that much. We don't have a lot of resources in the city. So what I noticed is I was going out playing sports in different cities and towns. I said, how come our fields don't look like that? How come our courts don't look like that? And I kind of like started to notice those economic differences. And I gave a lot of time back into my community. When I was in high school, I volunteered at the middle school with the girls sports teams. In high school, I volunteered over 500 hours with our local community center doing like a tobacco-free program. And ambassador, I did a health fair in our high school. Like I ran a health fair as a student. So I was always like, I think my way of channeling that energy was to give back and to be a source of inspiration, maybe that I didn't have, and let other people know like that help is out there, that people are valuable. So I think I was projecting like my own insecurities onto other people, but helping in a good way. So yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and you also mentioned that you were a little bit destructive as well. I think you were getting in trouble
Mhm.
more as well. And
Yeah.
was it one of those situations where it's like you were getting ahead of stuff despite what you were doing? You were so smart that you couldn't get, even if you got in trouble, you were still doing well in school, that you kept moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I got suspended. I got in school fights. I remember I fought a boy in 6th grade because
Who won?
of course, I won.
Yeah.
But it's not something I'm proud of. But
Mhm.
I was like lashing out.
Yeah.
But I always my schoolwork was very important to me. My sister went to Georgetown University, where I ended up going, and she was 9 years older than me, and she was a real role model to me. And she left she left home when I was 8, and I went to go visit her. It was cheaper at that time to fly Southwest
Mm-hmm.
and to do the $39 flight. So me and my mom went with her. It's the first time I traveled, like stayed at a hotel. And I saw Washington, D.C., and I said, that's where I'm going to school. And since I was 8 years old, I just did everything in my power to make sure like I got there, and I did. Because I'm stimulated intellectually a lot. And I love reading was another outlet. Like I would read a book every week, maybe 2, growing up. Since I was like in kindergarten, it's just reading and learning was always something that was like really big for me.
And throughout high school and early on before you got into college and Georgetown being, I guess you said that was your goal to get there. What did you feel once you accomplished that goal of yours? What kind of feelings ran through you?
Oh, it was a culture shock. I mean, it was completely different than I imagined.
Hmm.
Different in good and bad ways, right? I don't know. I think when my sister went, I saw the culture aspect because she was involved in a lot of the cultural programs. We went to like the multicultural graduation and things like that. But when I went, it was a complete culture shock. It was the most white people I've ever seen in my whole life, the most wealth I've seen in my whole life. Like even the Black people at Georgetown were rich,
Hmm.
and going to school with execs, with I think one of the Supreme Court judges, like his daughter was going to school with me at the time. It was like elitism at its best. And I didn't fit in a lot of ways. And it was also the first time that, so like I mentioned, I'm Cape Verdean. I went to Washington, D.C. They had no idea what Cape Verde is.
Hmm.
And so they looked at me and they're like, what are that movie, like some funny sort of Puerto Rican. They probably thought I was like some funny sort of Puerto Rican.
Hmm.
Like she's not Spanish, but she's like J-Lo a little bit. She's like from the hood. So I don't get it, So, and I'm light skinned, I got green eyes, so it doesn't help.
Hmm.
So it was like fitting into that circle as well. Like I had to like really figure out like where I fit in and who I was. Like I started to like ask myself and question myself, like, who am I and what do I want to be?
Yeah, I think it's a struggle a lot of us deal with when we first go to college. We never know what to expect and
Yeah.
how to get there and what we're gonna do there. And obviously, probably by the time you visited your sister, she was kind of already knowing how to make it work. And so you came in thinking, oh yeah, it's gonna be easy and meet all these people. But I mean, yeah, I feel you, dude. It's like the one of my friends' dad owned a yacht company in Europe, and he got kicked out of housing but had the money to live in like a nice apartment in downtown Boston. And it's like, people got money. I don't even know, like, what I thought people had money, I was way off on what people had money with. Like, so yeah,
Right.
that really and so how were you able to kind of overcome some of those challenges once you guys started going into university?
I just a perseverance, like I said. If I didn't know something, I would like I was that person who went to office hours. I went to our writing center. We had like a multicultural center. I went there for support. And I joined a lot of programs, like extracurricular activities, like just like in high school. I joined probably like 8 programs my first year, just to see like what I liked, and I just kept going. I like buckled down on my academics, got support. I remember I had to take pre-calc. I'm like, I already took pre-calc. I took calculus already, and now I'm like going backwards. But it was a different type of calculus. So I just remember I just doubled down. I did my studies, but I also like did the things that fueled me, like
Hmm.
the service. I joined like service boards, and I joined a sorority. I'm a part of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the best sorority out there. And we do a lot of service. So that was my way of like giving back to the community. I learned a lot about DC. I interned on the Hill with the Department of Justice. and I was able to just take advantage of any opportunity that came my way. And that helped me like stay focused, like stay focused and put my academics first.
Nice, nice. And I know you mentioned earlier when you were younger, because with all the trauma you were dealing with, you were focused really on community to kind of validate yourself. Were you still having those sort of feelings in college with all the community service you were doing? You still felt you were trying to validate yourself?
Now I put that together as an adult,
Hmm.
right? Like as a child, I'm not thinking about that. Like this is why I'm doing that.
Yeah.
But probably same thing as in college.
Hmm.
It was my way of healing and my and coping. I
Yeah.
guess coping in my way.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And so you obviously went from Georgetown University, and then you were I'm guessing you were able to kind of overcome that culture shock and get through successfully because obviously you went to George Washington University afterwards. What was the evolution like for you between undergrad and grad school?
What was evolution? I thought I wanted to go into law enforcement, right? Like I thought I wanted to like be part of like FBI or CIA. So I went ahead and applied for a criminology degree. And George Washington was a great school. I got two full rides at other schools and I turned them down. I tell people like if I had one regret in my life, it's that like go to where they're paying you
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
go.
Hmm.
So I went, and I think as I was going through my coursework, I realized that I didn't necessarily want to do enforcement. I wanted to work on policy because I didn't believe in some of the laws
Hmm.
and the policies that were happening and how laws came to be. And at the same time, I was working for the federal government. So I worked at the U.S. Agency for International Development. I worked there for 2 years. I did that like 9 to 5 during the day. And then I went to school. I went to grad school in the evenings. And that was a real learning experience. Like I helped, I was the liaison to the White House liaison. And that's when I learned like about political appointees. So whenever a president comes in, he appoints all the heads of all these agencies and all the leadership staff, like the director of every agency, every department in the agency, every leadership team. So we placed all those folks in our agency through Obama. And so it was a real learning experience. And then going to school at the same time, it was a really good learning experience. Like I tried to take advantage of a lot of opportunities, but still enjoying my life, enjoying my life. I was in a not so healthy relationship at the time
Hmm.
but I didn't really, it was like my first like serious relationship. And I didn't really like see a lot of the red signs. There were a lot of red signs. And I kind of like that started like my spiral emotionally. Um, yeah, yeah.
And this is when was this while you were still in George
Yep,
Washington, or
yep.
and then did that continue on until you graduated, or did things
Yeah,
change?
until I graduated. Yeah.
And then once you graduated, what was life like that for you?
So when I graduated, I had to decide if I was going to stay in DC or come back home.
Hmm.
And ultimately, my uncle ended up passing away a few months after I graduated from grad school here in Rhode Island, and I lived with him my whole life. So I said I was going to come home. I was going to come home, support my parents. My grandmother was here at the time. So I said, I'm just going to come home and like figure it out over here. So
Hmm.
I got a job promotion in DC, and I called them and I was like, I can't go. I actually moved all my stuff there.
Hmm.
I like set up an apartment with my cousin, and I was just like, I something inside of me said, "Don't go, don't stay there."
Hmm. Hmm.
And I came back home.
And did your was your relationship over by that point?
Yes, it fizzled out toward when I moved back.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, nice. And so, yeah, I mean, you took that leap of faith to kind of get back to Rhode Island and back to your roots. And what was that like for you once you got here?
It was completely different, like, being a high school student and being an adult, like, I lived in DC for, like, 8 years, so, like, coming into it, it was, like, crazy. It was election year, mind you, like, it was a governor's race when Gina Raimondo got elected,
Hmm.
and, I ended up joining, my first job in Rhode Island. I My cousin introduced me to someone and was like, "Oh, like, maybe you can work for this campaign." It was Angel Tavares's campaign for governor. So I'm like back into Rhode Island. People are like, "Who is this Carlene girl?" Right? Because nobody knows me from here like that. And I had to like kind of like prove myself, but also like it gave me a good opportunity to like put myself out there and meet people, and work in the community that I loved. So I did that for a whole year. And I worked for then Congressman Cicilline on his reelection campaign as well. And then I said, I need to get a real job because these campaigns ain't doing it. So I ended up working for Blackstone Valley Prep, which is a charter school.
Hmm.
Um, I was a dean of operations there for a year. And then after that, that's when I moved over to the Central Falls School District where I went to school. And that was an honor because I was able to bring back resources and grants and activities for our youth. Some things like that I didn't have growing up.
Yeah.
So that was like full circle.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. And so what was it like, when you go back to your school and you're now on the other side of the table? Obviously when you're a kid and you're in high school, you're like, man, my school doesn't do this or it does do that or it deals with whatever. But then you get flipped to the other side and you're like, oh, okay, I see what we're working with. What kind of shock did that give you?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually easier working with the students than working with the adults. I say that in any aspect
Hmm.
of life, right? It's like the problem is not the students. The problem are the adults.
Hmm.
And that's what I found, right? The students are awesome even now. Like I go back to the school all the time. I speak to students, and the problem is not the school. So I wanted to like think outside the box and like what could we do to like really support these students.
Hmm.
And one thing that happens in Central Falls is we have a lot of students who don't end up like graduating on time, right, in June. So they have to do summer school in order to make the August graduation. So, and then there's a bunch of other students like the younger grades who just need summer school. So I applied for the grant through the state. It was like the first time that they put out this skills for Rhode Island's youth grant. And what I did is I tied the academic component with workforce because students need to work, right? It's like summertime. They're like, a lot of our students are supporting their families or supporting themselves. So they need income, legal income. So what I did was the students went to school 9 to 12. And then from 12 to 3 or 12 to 4, they worked in a local business, like small business, or nonprofit, or even the school district between those hours, and they got paid for it through the grant. So it's a thinking outside the box, like how can we best support these students so that they're achieving academically, but we're also thinking about the whole student. So I was able to like do things like that. I took them on a lot of field trips. Like that's something that we didn't necessarily have growing up, right? Like growing up in like an inner city, even in Rhode Island being so close to the beach, a lot of students don't make it down there.
Hmm.
So I remember one field trip, we took them to the beach. We took them to the National Guard camp. We took them to a bunch of different job fairs and career fairs that were specifically for youth. And I thought that was important for exposure because growing up, I wasn't exposed to any of that stuff. And it's so, and being able to leave Rhode Island and see DC and be exposed to different experiences, I wanted to bring that to our youth.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that we did.
Yeah. No, it's Rhode Island is interesting when it comes to distance. There's no distance really. If you go anywhere outside of Rhode Island, it's like everything's close by. But Boston's considered a day trip when I was growing up. Like, oh, you're gonna go to Boston? Oh, like we didn't just go to Boston. There's times then as an adult that I've gone to Boston like 3 times in one day, to go drop off something, come back and go do something else. But,
Oh, you're a good one. I wouldn't do that.
but see, but that's exactly it. People are like, "Oh my god!" And now I live in Connecticut. I'm 45 minutes from, like, 40 to 50 minutes from my parents' house, so I'm always the one coming up to do stuff because they're like, "Oh
Yeah,
man, you live so far. You live so far," and I'm like, "Dude, I used to go an hour and a half to go get Raspas for my wife when she was pregnant in Houston because the best ones were in the west side of Houston."
uh,
But yeah, it's just there is this perspective of you miss out on outside of your bubble, for people in Rhode Island. And we,
absolutely.
like I said, like one of the thing on my other one of my other episodes, I talked about how I didn't apply to Brown because I thought there was too many white people at Brown, and I applied to Boston
Mhm.
University. I'm like, it's the same shit, it was the
Yeah,
same thing. It's just you're stuck in your little bubble. You don't know different. You think Providence. You think just because the school's in Providence, it's
that's
going to be
true.
closer to what your culture is, but you don't realize that that's its own ecosystem inside of Providence that live completely different than what you are. So yeah, no, it's. I'm glad you were able to kind of give that additional perspective to some of your students. So
Yeah.
and what did you start doing after you were working for Central Falls? What was your next step?
So after Central Falls, I actually went to Providence College,
Mhm.
and I one of my primary roles there was running a fellowship program. So it was called the Feinstein Community Fellowship Program. It was named after Alan Sean Feinstein, which is like a huge philanthropist here in Rhode Island. And I worked with primarily first gen students of color, low income students, and they were placed in local nonprofits throughout Rhode Island. And they would get like a tuition scholarship for that. And then I ran biweekly like workshops with those students as well. So it was like a leadership program. And I managed our day-to-day things in the office. And I did that for 5 years. At the end, I kind of told you a little bit about it, but it was a very traumatizing experience at the end of my road there. Because it's a Catholic, predominantly white school, and the leadership is very conservative, and I want to say racist, so heavily racist.
Mhm.
And they just didn't treat students of color or staff, faculty of color very well, and that's why you see a mass exodus over the last decade
Mhm.
of people. And unfortunately, I was part of that, but I'm proud of myself that I was able to like recognize that. And before I even had like my next job lined up, like I resigned because it wasn't good for my mental health.
Mhm.
And that's the one thing like I emphasize to people all the time. It's like a job is they'll replace you in a second, and they probably need you more than you need them. And I think often we one define ourselves by our roles, but two, we give so much power over to employers and think like nothing else is gonna come, nothing better. Like I won't I don't I'm not qualified for this position, but I just want to challenge people to say like, no, you can get another job. You are worthy, you are qualified, and you can explore. You can explore your options, and you don't have to be stuck in a place that doesn't value you.
Mhm.
Because when you are stuck in places like that, you start to devalue yourself, and like that's the worst position you can be in.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I felt that for the longest time too in my career, where I'm stuck at a job and I'm like, something will come, please, something will come, because I don't know if I'll apply anywhere and they'll take me, and you just keep sucking at it, and you think you have to be loyal to a company because that's what they tell you, and when with time, my perspective of loyalty has been, I'm loyal with you while I'm working there, and I'm going to work hard while I'm there, and that's my loyalty to the company, but it goes both ways. And I also had a job where I wasn't getting raises and anything like that, and then I left, and then 2 jobs later, they're calling me to come back with a higher position, a higher pay, and I'm like, you guys are underpaying what I'm making now at the position you want now. So if you would have kept me for like 10% more 5 years ago, I would have been staying there for a lot longer. But now you're almost doubling what you would have had pay me before, and you're not even close to what I'm making now. So yeah, it's like you gotta realize your value to these companies because it really does. We don't recognize it, and we think we get taken advantage of. Especially because we're immigrants. Our parents were workers. They just went and worked and did what they had to
Yeah,
do. So they just sucked it up and went to work and came home, fed the kids, and that's it. So
absolutely.
so no, I appreciate that, and I think that's from that what you're mentioning is part of what you guys do now in your consulting firm. Did you leave that Feinstein? And is that when you started doing the consulting, or was that there was still more to
Yeah,
do? Yeah. So
good question. I actually started it while I was there.
mhm,
So I always knew deep down that I wanted to do my own thing. Like freedom is one of the values that I really believe in.
mhm,
It's like freedom of choice, freedom of just choosing your happiness. Um, so I was like, how can I utilize my skills and strengths and do something like on my own? Like, so it was right before COVID happened, January 2020. And I read this book. Trent Shelton, he's a inspirational speaker. He's an author, and I read one of his books. It was called The Greatest You, and he really inspired me to like pursue myself and my wants and my needs. So I was like, I'm gonna create this consulting business. It's gonna be called The Greatest You Consulting because I want everyone to be their greatest you. I think it exemplifies like my life story and how I want to share my gift with others.
mhm,
Um, so I originally was like, oh, I'll consult around everything, right? And you can't really do everything. And over the over the years, I just got into recovery April 7th of last year from substances and alcohol, which I'm very proud of. And through that journey, I realized I had a lot of mental health struggles too. I was in this past year and a half, I was diagnosed with, like I said, ADHD, anxiety, depression, complex PTSD. So through that journey, I realized I want to help other people who are recovering from anything because we all recover from something. We all have traumas in our life, and somebody's little trauma could be somebody's big trauma.
mhm,
That could be a divorce. That could be a breakup to some people. That could be like sexual abuse. People who experience sexual abuse, 95% of them turn to drugs and alcohol.
yeah,
95%. So at the age of 10, somebody should have told me, like, you're probably going to go down that route,
mhm,
right? And this is a message now I'm able to give to youth, but also give to adults and caretakers
mhm,
of those precious youth. So I centered my business now on health and wellness, around the 8 dimensions of wellness, which could be emotional, physical, social, financial, because when we neglect one of those areas, usually another area is neglected.
mhm,
So through my business, I do workshops around mindfulness, yoga, trauma, mental health, and also put on events. I've been doing the Central Falls Job Fair for 10 years now, with the Department of Labor and Training and Progreso Latino. I'm going to be hosting a health fair to talk more about like preventive strategies, not necessarily like, okay, you're in it now. Now what medications are we taking? I want to take a holistic approach to
mhm.
that, to health and helping people. So yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, first, congratulations on recovery. I know that's a difficult thing to do, and it's a lifelong journey that you deal with all the time. So, I'm proud of you for sticking with that and getting through that. Because yeah, I think at least for me, we all have family members and stuff like that that have dealt with different aspects of things, and so it's great to see some success with that. So I just want to let you know I'm very proud of you for all of that. And then it's really exciting to see that you've turned your traumas into and I think that's something you've said you've always done. You've turned your traumas and projected them out to the world to help other people and improve the lives of others. And so what's been some of probably the biggest challenges for you in that realm?
Yeah. I think I think what I've learned is And this is something like I want to talk about for a good amount of time
Sure.
because in our communities, we don't talk about self-love
Hmm.
and self-acceptance and self-respect, right? And it's always, especially as women of color, it's always, what are you giving? What are you putting out to the world? Like, how are you going to serve the men? Like, the kids come first, right? Like, you never talk about yourself.
Hmm.
And I had to flip the script. Once I went down that rabbit hole and I found myself in a deep, dark place all alone, like I knew I needed help. And like asking for help is probably one of the most courageous things that you can do. And
Hmm.
I just want to let other people know, if you need help, if you need assistance, like there are places, are resources that you can go to. And it's not a sign of weakness for you to ask for help. Like I grew up thinking like, oh, that was a weakness. I had to be hyper independent, do everything on my own. And I don't have all the answers. I was the first person in my family to get sober, to go to a facility, to go to Butler, to talk about mental health. And it's so stigmatized in our community, that I didn't have that person. Like I couldn't go to an uncle or aunt and say, oh, how can you help me through this? Like, do you have a recommendation? Like, you can't go to your employer because then they look at you crazy. So it's like I had to figure out my way, and I had to ask for help because I didn't have those answers or resources in my circle. So I just want other people to know, like, it's okay for you to ask for help. It's actually a very courageous thing to do.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
It is super, super difficult too for a lot of people. So yeah, being able to
mhm,
hear other people say that, I'm sure is really helpful.
yeah.
Go ahead, continue.
And then, yeah, and then in terms of, helping other people, I realized I had to help myself first in that process, right? Like we can't, if our cup is empty, we can't fill anyone else's cup. And as a mother, like I got into an abusive relationship, like right after I had my daughter. And I was no good to her if I wasn't good to myself.
Hmm.
So I had to get help for myself in order to be the best version of myself for her. So even in my business now, a lot of the practices, workshops is centered on you, right? Like you can't change the world until you change yourself. So, or heal yourself. And by healing yourself, you're healing generations, you're healing bloodlines. And in my family, we didn't heal. Like I said, my grandfather died by suicide, and nobody in the family thought that's important to talk about.
Hmm.
Things like that are genetic. They get passed down from generation to generation. That's something you need to talk about. I have my daughter. I have a therapist I see every week, but my 5-year-old daughter now, she's been in therapy since she was 4 years old.
Hmm.
And people say, like, your daughter's in therapy. Yes, she's in therapy because she's seen a lot of things in her 4 years. And I want her to be set up and prepared in a way that I was not.
Hmm.
So that's her learning to regulate her emotions and deal with her emotions and learn coping skills and strategies, something that our parents didn't teach us, our grandparents didn't have to teach. So one thing that I do is I lead by example. I show people, after this interview we're doing, I'm going to the sauna, I'm going to read. I said for an hour, maybe 2 hours, I'll be there.
Hmm.
I tell my daughter that. I tell my mom that, who's watching her. So she knows that's my way of decompressing and centering myself. Right? It's not always about other people.
Hmm.
Uh, to be the best people, we have to take care of ourselves.
Yep.
Uh, and I pass that message on to my daughter. If they're fighting over a toy, or she sees somebody else doing something they're not supposed to, Raina, focus on yourself. I tell
Hmm.
her, focus on yourself. What are you supposed to be doing in this moment?
Hmm.
Right? And if we all did that, the world would be such a better place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's commendable too that you're taking the life lessons you have and applying it to your daughter. I think one of the great things about our generation, as far as parents goes, is that we're very reflective of what didn't work for us as a kid, and we try to do the opposite. Well, I think a lot of our, as you mentioned, I think generational trauma for a lot of our parents, it was repeating the same things because they thought that's what worked for them, and people didn't get the therapy, people didn't get the stuff. Like you're teaching your daughter not just that she's not just going to therapy because it's therapeutic, which it is, but also you're teaching her that it's okay to go. So if she doesn't need therapy for 10 years and decides, oh my God, I'm dealing with stuff, hopefully she's a better understanding of being able to say, hey, I'm not afraid to go get help. And that's very commendable. That's, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to overcome from our from our cultures and our lives and our generational traumas of what we need. And even I think as an adult, you know, I I I go back to my parents. I'm like, you're dealing with a lot of stuff. Maybe you should go see a therapist. You know what I mean? It's trying to work back and forth, and I feel like our generation has been really good at being able to be receptive of that. And so I commend you for that. And as a parent, I never stop thinking about what can I do better to help my child in there. So thank you so much for all that. And then and so from the stuff you're doing with your with uh, greatest you consulting. We talked about all the things that you do and the mental health and the PTSD things. What do you feel has been one of your biggest successes as an organization so far that you've been able to produce?
Mhm. Um, I'll say two things. One is something historically, and then something new that's coming. So, like I mentioned, I've been doing the Central Falls Job Fair. I started it when I was on the city council here in Central Falls back in 2015. So this year is the 10th year that we're doing it, and it's grown from one-time event to the 10th time that we're doing it. And now we're doing it twice a year instead of once annually. And we bring together between 30 and 40 employers throughout the state, and we invite job seekers and people who need resources. And on top of employers, we've been inviting apprenticeship programs. We've been inviting colleges like College Unbound and getting folks to get their 4-year degree. CCRI, Lifespan, who has workforce development programs as well. And that's something that we're really proud of, to be able to match job seekers with employers who are offering them benefits. I always go back to one of the successes. One of the recruiters now for First Student, which is a bus company. She's a recruiter now, but she went through the job fair
Mm-hmm.
5 years ago, and that's where she got her job.
Oh,
And
nice.
5 years later, she's recruiting for the company. So for me, that just it comes full circle to know that in a community. When I first started the job fairs weren't local. They were in Warwick, right, at a Crown Plaza. They were at different hotels and things like that. And they didn't used to come to our communities, especially communities like Central Falls. So what I said is, I'm bringing the employers to us.
Mm-hmm.
That job fair is staying in Central Falls. And you're going to come where the people are. And what I'm proud of is now with the recruiters, I want to say if we have 30 employers, at least 20 to 25 of them bring bilingual recruiters or even multilingual recruiters, because they know our population and they value that. And they say, I'm going to send an employer who speaks the language of the folks who are attending.
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. That's huge for the employer side, because they don't usually do that. So being able to see a program like that evolve and grow and change the lives of people, that's been huge for our company.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And so, sorry, you were going to say something?
And the second part of that
Sorry.
is I'm getting into wellness, health and wellness product development.
Mm-hmm.
So I just developed a wellness journal, which is has daily journal prompts, a weekly journal prompts. It runs on a 90-day period. So folks can jot down their thoughts on my journey and my mental health recovery journey and my substance use journey. I journaled a lot. And that was something that helped me put pen to paper. Your bilateral movement, it actually helps trauma and lower stress and anxiety by writing things down. So I will be launching a wellness journal in the next few weeks. It's printing now. So that's a tool on top of the workshops and events that folks can use to better improve their health.
Nice. Awesome. Well, congratulations on that. That's pretty cool. That you're making those moves and getting some stuff out there. So I'm very happy to hear that. And obviously, before you when you were talking about stuff, you mentioned also, when I get out of here, I'm going to the spa, and you're gonna go unwind and read and do there. And you I see a lot of your Facebook, Instagram posts where you're always at the gym and doing stuff like that. And so it looks like you really try to strike a balance between your mental and your physical health. And people lots of times also focus on one or the other. Why is it important to have that balance between both?
Yeah, good question. Like I said, when you neglect your physical health and your emotional health, two different things, right? But they can overlap. And for me, and a lot of people like myself, like I have ADHD, like I'm restless. I have to be doing something. And for me, movement is my way of expressing my emotions. And I think like playing sports growing up, like what we don't express, we suppress. Right. And for me, movement is the thing that helps me like express those emotions, even if I don't know it subconsciously. Through moving, through yoga, through sports, through lifting, I'm able to express those emotions. And like even the sauna, being in 200-degree weather, it's hard for you to think about anything, right? So your mind isn't like, I don't have all these intrusive negative thoughts coming through because I'm in 200-degree weather. There's
Yeah.
not much I can do. So I think it's important to like have a healthy balance between like movement and like emotional health,
Mhm.
because study after study has shown that being outdoors, being in the sun, being in nature, like going on walks, it helps your mental health. Like no questions about that. And that's something that I really emphasize with my daughter. Like I wasn't a nature girl, right? But now we go out, we play with the bugs. I'm like, don't kill the bugs. I'm scared. And it's like it's a learning thing. And like we go to parks and we go to Lincoln Woods. It's like we hike, and I want to expose her to all of that good things. She doesn't sleep in her room. We turn her room into a yoga studio.
Oh, nice.
So, like we do yoga together. And she yesterday she was drawing. I have a dog. Animals are very therapeutic
Hmm.
too. So if you need a something, get an animal.
Hmm.
Um, and she was drawing chalk outside, and she drew my dog a hotel, and she put a meditation room
Oh, nice.
in his hotel, right? So that's telling you like these things I'm passing it out to my daughter.
Yeah.
And now I tell her like mommy's going to the gym, mommy's going to my yoga retreat, and she's like she knows what
Yeah.
it is. She goes, it helps mommy,
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
helps mommy to be a better mother.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's amazing what you just said, because it's really the lead by example kind of aspect of life, where I think one of the criticisms I always had of my parents is that they'd always tell me one thing and then do something else. You know what I mean? I'm like, why
mm,
why why am I getting in trouble for something you do? Like, why do I get in trouble because I dropped the plate, but you just dropped the plate and nobody yelled at you? You know what I mean? It's like, so you lead by example. I think is always important, and it looks like you're doing a great job with it. And I'm really glad to hear that. But it was just funny because it reminded me like a week ago. Like I'm always talking to my daughter, and where we talk about stuff, and I like to talk to her. And one of the things my dad told me, now that I'm an adult, he's like, one of the things I love about you raising your daughter that's different than what I did was that I yelled at you and I beat you and I told you what to do, and you talked to your daughter. You explain things to her. You let her know why this is this way or why this is difficult. And I try to really be real with her and say, yes, it's challenging and you're going to get better if you keep doing this and stuff. And so we were having a conversation about soccer, 'cause she's also a soccer girl. She does soccer like 6 days a
yeah.
week, where she's on two teams. And we were talking about how we were in the city town, and she hadn't moved up quite yet, to like the high level just because the numbers, but she wasn't getting challenged where she was. And I was like, if she didn't get into the higher level team this year, I would have put her in probably a different program. And she's like,
Mm.
yeah, because I need to be able to be challenged. If I don't get challenged, I'm not going to improve and get better. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, someone's been listening to my podcast. I'm like, holy shit. I was like, there you go. All right, Eva. And she's just started laughing. But
Aw.
she was like, I'm glad to hear that all our conversations that we're having is actually making an impact, where she can
Oh
look
yeah.
at this situation and understand that, yeah, this is too easy for me. I need the challenge if I want to get better. You know what I mean? And that's not something I ever had as a kid. That's not something I learned as a kid. This took me a long time, to
Right.
get there. So, and remarkably, I don't even know how I got here, but it kind of segues into like my next question as well. Like, obviously, as an adult, reflection and looking back and realizing the stuff we've been through and the stuff that we've gone through, and modifying our lives or or understanding what we went through to kind of change things, I think is an important aspect of thing. And it seems like you've done a lot of reflection
Mhm.
on things that you've dealt with in the past. Tell me, how do you think, how important is reflecting to you, and how has that affected your life?
I mean, it's been huge, and it's something I work on every single day. Like, and I have a smile on my face, and everything sounds peachy, but every day is a struggle. But I know if I have a positive outlook, and if I'm grateful and I'm thankful, that it's easier. It's
Hmm.
like that much easier, right? So by no means is my life easy, but it's worthwhile. It's the most worthwhile and at peace that I've ever been in my life. And that's what, looking back at my life like a year, 2 years ago, like, I would never imagine my life being the way it is now. Like, I am at peace. And I thank God every single day for my recovery, for those challenges, for those dark days. Like, I have high functioning depression. So like, I may not look like a person, quote unquote, that's depressed because I'm high functioning. But it's challenging, and I have to remind myself that I'm here for a reason, and that I have everything within me. And that's like my biggest blessing in this world, is like going through those dark times, because now I know there's light. Now I know that I can overcome, and nothing that I went through was like for nothing. It all had a purpose, and not everything was good. Like, all the abuse I went through, like, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And by no means was it okay, but I'm able to accept it now. I'm able to accept that it was part of my journey, my learning experience, my growth, and my development. And now I'm able to, with good intentions, do something about that. Right. So I didn't, we mentioned growing up, I use a lot of that energy to do for others. Now I use that energy to do for myself,
Hmm.
and that's what was missing my whole life. Like, I didn't pour into myself, and I didn't think I was good enough, and I didn't think I was enough. So reflecting back on life, like, I'm just so grateful and thankful for where I am, because now I get to pour into me and becoming my greatest self.
Awesome. And so I'm glad. And we talked about this earlier. That you felt that you had to validify yourself. You know what I mean? And do you feel like you've reached a level of validity to yourself?
I think I've reached a level. Like, I love myself. I'm married. People like, are you married? I'm like, yes, I married myself.
Nice.
Um, and I went to a yoga retreat last year, and this ring says, nevertheless, she persisted.
Hmm.
And I learned to love myself. And I do not love anyone on this earth, even my daughter, more than I love myself.
Good.
Because without me, there's nothing.
Yep.
So I put this ring on as a reminder of like love and acceptance. And Carlene, you're beautiful and you're enough just the way that you are. Um, and that's enough for me. That's really enough for me. So, but it is a journey. I struggle. I struggle a lot. But my therapist helps. My medication helps.
Hmm.
And movement helps.
Yeah.
So it's a journey.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've learned from starting this podcast is the importance of mental health, and how, especially people who are successful, are able to open up about it and seek help when needed, because we, the struggle will always hold you down, and it's kind of like a chain to your foot that
Mhm.
if you don't get help, you're never going to elevate yourself to what you need to be. So yeah, no, I'm always, it feels unintentionally, my podcast has been just a mental health promotional tool
Yes,
for people, because
I love
it
that.
comes up over and over and over again. And I think it's one of the biggest pinnacles of being successful is, mental health. And so
Mhm.
I'm glad to see things are working out better for you, and that you're finding that peace and that validity that you deserve. So I'm very proud of you for all of that. So and then I think, usually when we start getting to the tail end, I start asking some questions. And so, one of the things I always like to ask my guests are, if you could go back and talk to the younger version of yourself, what's some advice you'd give yourself?
Hmm. What would I tell baby Carlene? I think baby Carlene would tell me something.
Yeah.
Tell me she would, and I actually had this, I don't know, epiphany, is that what it is? I was kayaking, and because I think my younger self could tell me much more than I can tell that younger person, honestly. Because as a young person, you just have so much wisdom and knowledge and innocence. As adults, we're tainted with life. So my inner child, she told me that I was out kayaking at a yoga retreat in near New York, and I was in the middle of like a river kayaking. I'm like this little girl from CF, like out here, and we had to do like a mindful meditation out on our kayak. And I was just praying I don't fall out. And she told me, my younger child told me that, she's like, look at you, like look where you are right now, like look around. And she was like, I'm so proud of you. And for me, that like just brought everything full circle for her to tell me. I think I was looking for that validation everywhere else, and I needed that validation from my younger self to tell me, like, you're doing like the damn thing. Like,
Mhm.
look at you now. Like, you're a badass.
Mhm.
And yeah, that validation from my younger child, that's like all I needed.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
and now I give that to my daughter.
Nice.
And that's the biggest blessing, because if I didn't go through half the stuff I went through, I wouldn't be the kind of mother that I am.
Mhm.
Like I gentle parent. Yep, I gentle parent. My daughter, like she's an adult. We talk through her feelings. She has an emotion chart, and she brings it to me if I get angry. She goes, "Mommy, here's the emotion chart."
Yeah.
But if I didn't go through my experiences, I wouldn't be the kind of mom that I am.
Yep.
So
No, I agree. Yeah, I'm a big proponent on, like, I apologize to my daughter when I go out of line. Like, I never would get apologized when my parents would get out of line. They,
I'm not even, as an adult,
yeah,
they don't say sorry.
yeah. And so for me, it's very common to be like, okay, I kind of went overboard when we were talking about the situation. I was like, but I want you to understand where I'm coming from, and I'm frustrated, and sometimes adults get frustrated too, and it's okay to feel that way, but it's not okay the way I talk. And so
Yeah.
we try, I think, and like I said, once again reflective aspect of my life where I look back and say, what did I hate as a kid? And I want to make sure I'm not that way with my daughter. There was a lot of stuff growing up that I hated, and
Yes.
that I hated the way I was. And I think we all, hated some aspect of how we were raised. And I just try to look back and say, no, you know what? I don't want to do that with my daughter.
Mhm.
And you still catch yourself doing it sometimes, but you still gotta, be okay with changing. So, um, and then, but thank you so much. I mean, that's beautiful, and I'm glad. Stopping to smell the roses is probably one of the hardest things to do sometimes. Being able to stop and
Yes.
say, "Hey, look, I'm here." You're always chasing, but you're never reflecting, and you don't look
Yes.
back. So yeah, no, that's wonderful. And then
Mhm.
I think lastly, how do you say success in Spanglish? What does success mean to you?
Yeah, you said it before I did. So success of me in Spanglish is being present
Hmm.
and being able to enjoy moments, and not, for me, not thinking too much into the future and not looking too much into the past, because nothing good is there. And if we live into the future, then we're not enjoying the current moment. So every day I try to be as present as I can, in all my doings. Like, somewhere I was listening to a podcast, and they said, like, be where your feet are. So my feet is here with you doing this podcast, even though my feet are up, but they're here with you. When I'm with my daughter, like, my feet are there, be with her. If I'm at work, if I'm working, then my feet are there.
Hmm.
So for me, success is having the freedom to be where your feet are and be present in that moment.
It's awesome, man. And that's beautiful. And it's amazing the lessons we learn from our kids sometimes as well. Because I remember something was posted on the internet, and they were like, uh, you're running to go to school, and your kid's walking slow, and you yell at them for being slow. Oh, hurry up, get in the car. Hurry up and get there. Hurry up, we're doing late. And it's like at some point we lost the fact that she was enjoying every aspect of what she was in at that moment while we're rushing to get to the next phase. You know what I
Right.
mean? And and I remember from clear as day for me the first time I put my daughter on grass and the amazement of just touching grass for the first time. And I'm like, we lost that. We see grass all the time. Now I sit on grass and I'm itchy and I hate grass. You know what I mean? But at some point, it was the most amazing feeling because I've never felt
Right.
this in my life. And it's like sometimes we do
Well,
have to look at little Carlene's point of view and get that
mhm.
affirmation from your younger youth. So no,
Yeah.
thank you so much for all of that, and thank you for your positivity, thank you for your honesty, and thank you for being open to discuss everything. I really appreciate everything that you presented today. And so I guess tell me, how can people get more information about what you and your company does?
Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for this platform. Thank you for the safe space that you create for people,
Oh,
because that's what I hope to do in my life, is just create safe spaces
well, thank you.
individually and with groups. So you can reach me on my website. It's greatestyouconsulting.com. You can also reach me on Instagram, Heal with Carlene, or Greatest You Consulting. So yeah, just check out my website if you ever want to connect, do any workshops. I am local to the Rhode Island, Boston area, but I'm also international because there's such thing as Zoom.
Yeah,
So
there's the internet, so
feel free to reach out to me.
nice, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, I really appreciate you taking the time to come up here and tell us your journey. Thank you so much, Carly.
Thank you.
And for everyone else listening, thanks so much for joining us. And I hope you'll join me again next time as we continue to learn how to say success in Spanglish.